Hi everyone, welcome to episode number 14 of Perfect Inspiration. My name is Brian Matias. So today's episode, actually I'm going a little bit back to February of 2012 here, because I think this shot is important. I know for me personally, I remember very, very vividly taking this shot, or at least I remember almost not taking this shot. I was in the desert at Velia Fire State Park in Nevada after the WPPI conference ended, and I was out here with some amazing photographers like Ken Sklute and Sal Sincata and JB Sully and Laurie Nordstrom, along with some onOne folks. We had a bunch of motorcycles go into the park here, and we had a model with us, so we were going to have some fun, photographing the model in this beautiful desert landscape. Now, while everyone was off photographing the model, for me, I was trying to get some scenic landscape shots. And I remember I mentioned how I remembered almost not getting this shot, and that was because I particularly wanted this shot of this curvy road. A lot of the roads that I saw in Valley of Fire were, straight, and they kind of meandered all the way into the background. And I was looking for something where I can get a nice little S-curve over here, and this fit the bill. The only problem is that to get the S-curving in this particular frame where you see it, I had these two signs over here. I had this curvy road sign, and I had this no parking sign, and that sign right there. And unfortunately, I don't have the ability legally or the tools necessary to remove these signs. And based on the particular positioning here, I could have spent time removing this sign, but it's just too much of, an element for me to clone it out. These signs right here are a lot easier, but this curvy sign, really, I figured, you know what? I can either just not get this shot, or I can actually use this as part of my element. And in a way, it really does work nicely. This traffic sign here is warning for a curvy road, and it really adds depth, especially the way it's anchored over here in the right frame, the right third of the frame. It adds depth to the actual curve. So I like the way it looked, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to keep it in here. The other thing that I wanted to share with you is when I took this shot, I actually took 9 exposures. I bracketed 9 exposures here, and we'll kind of cycle through them really quickly because you can see here how it's accommodating for all of the bright and dark areas. Now, here's the thing. More than showing you the brackets or showing you tone mapping, one of the important points that I want to make is this kind of a scene. I see way too many people out there taking brackets and tone mapping when there's absolutely no reason for it. So if we look at a scene like this here, I'm going to take this image, this particular one again. Let's go to the grid view. You can see as I cycle through the brackets in grid view, look at the histogram, and you can see that just about all of the main, especially these two, the first and the third, there's so much data in the histogram from the shadows through the highlights that you really don't need to bracket. Bracketing is when, in one shot, you're really kind of like, for instance, here, you're really pushing towards the shadows and you can see how all the data is bunched out. Bracketing and tone mapping will help you recover that information, but as important as effective bracketing is, or rather as effective as good tone mapping is, so is the ability to discern when you don't need it. So, yes, I did take my brackets over here, but when I sat down at home, I realized I don't need brackets whatsoever. In fact, I could have just taken a shot in the field, looked at the histogram, and realized I don't need it. But for me, because hard drive space is rather cheap these days, I don't feel a need. I'd rather have the information than not. So what are we going to do? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to even out this histogram. I'm going to go to the develop module here, and I'm going to start by dropping the overall exposure down just a bit. Now, what I'm going to do is, and you can see how we're bunching most of that really nice midtone information right in the center of the image. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start adjusting the highlights, the shadows, the white point, and the black point. And I'm going to do that by using the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC. When I do that, you'll see that up here, if you see when I press it, tone turns to reset tone. That now means that when I drag these 4 sliders, I'm going to actually have a display that shows where my values should be. So with the highlights, I can drag it all the way out before I start to see anything. So I'm going to turn the Option key off, and I'm going to just bring it up just a bit. I'm going to repeat the process with the shadows. The shadows, you can see how I have a little bit of a shadow loss around the sign, so I'm going to bring that out until I don't see hardly any dots. Next thing, I'm going to go with the white point. I'm going to set that. Now, the white point, really, the white point, I'm going to see if I can bring it out to the edge, but just before clipping. So I'm going to bring it out to the right here, where we have a nice kind of full spectrum. And then the same thing with the black point. I'm going to bring that down just around there. Now, with that done, I'm going to readjust my exposure accordingly to about here. So you can now see that with just a few quick adjustments, some raw adjustments, actually working on a JPEG, you can see that we have all of the information in the scene. We really didn't need to do any tone mapping or degrade it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go stylize. That's about all I will do at this point, only because I don't need to do anything else. And to do that, I'm going to actually send this over to Photoshop because I want to use the content-aware tools to take care of some of those distractions other than this sign. To do that, I'm just going to go to Photo, Edit In, and select Adobe Photoshop CS6 or CS5 or 4, whatever version you have. Now, I realized that I mentioned, you can use CS4, and you can Photoshop CS4. However, content-aware filling didn't come until CS5. So if you're going to try to do what I'm doing here, you'll need at least Photoshop CS5 or CS6. The first thing I'm going to do is take my lasso tool from the tool belt here, and I'm just going to make a quick selection around this. Actually, I can see I didn't do a good job. I'm going to go around this sign here, and I'm just going to make, you can see here, just a kind of a quick and dirty selection. I'm then going to go to the Edit menu item, select Fill, and make sure that the Use dropdown has Content Aware, and I'll hit OK. Now, if I deselect, you can see that it did an OK job, and that's probably because of my selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back 3 times and then redo my lasso. So again, just one more time, I'm going to try to get maybe a little bit better, a little bit tighter of a selection. And I want to do this because I want to show you how changing your selection around can actually impact what you get with your content-aware fill. So again, Edit, Fill, we'll hit OK, disable that. And it's looking a lot better this time. This is totally passable. The next thing I'm going to do is draw another selection around the rock, this little boulder in its shadow, Edit, Fill, hit OK, and it takes care of that in no time. Now, for the rest of my distractions here, I'm just going to use the content-aware healing brush. It looks like, or rather it's called the spot healing brush, and then you want to make sure that content-aware, this radio button at the top, is selected. I'm just going to draw on some of these rocks and their shadows because I find them to be distracting. And so I'm just getting rid of them. I'm also going to draw really quickly right there on that sign. That had absolutely no purpose for me in this shot. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm just kind of getting rid of some of these visual distractions. I don't spend typically too much time, but basically in my periphery, when I use my periphery vision to look over here, if I see anything that particularly jumps out, I usually try to eliminate it. All right, with that done, I've taken care of my distractions. Actually, that right there in the road was bothering me. Now I've taken care of my distractions. I'm going to send this image. I'm already in Photoshop, so I might as well just send it over to Perfect Effects from here. And I can do that by going to the File menu, selecting Automate, and then going to Perfect Effects. All right, so in Perfect Effects, I know right off the bat, for a scene like this, especially a desert scene, there is an effect that I've used in the past under the Movie Looks category, all the way on the right, called Thermopylae. And this effect was built for a scene like this, and I think you can see where I'm going here. It's looking pretty cool. However, we're not going to start with this just yet. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to the blending options over here, and I'm going to blend that Thermopylae effect using a soft light blending mode. And you can see what it does is just add some richness to the scene while retaining the color tone in the rock over here in the sand. I'm going to bring that strength down to 0, and I'm going to bring it up about halfway to about 52%. Now I'm going to hit Add, and guess what? I'm going to reapply that Thermopylae effect right over it, except this time I'm going to keep it with a normal blending mode. So you can see what we've done here. I'm going to bring that strength down to 0, and then bring it up to about 60%. That's looking good. And what that first blending mode did was just add a little bit more contrast, a little bit more richness to the scene. So now I'm going to hit add, and now for those of you that know how I process, you know that the first effects I apply usually will apply to the whole image, and then I start applying effects for specific areas. So for this particular scene here, really it's the sign. That to me now is the starring role. The one thing that I wanted to initially get rid of is now like a major player. So to bring out that sign, what I want to do is I'm going to go to the effect options drop down over here, and I'm going to go to the color enhancer. With the color enhancer, I can actually adjust the hue, saturation, and lightness of the entire scene, or I can go to the color range option and select the yellow channel. You'll see here that the saturation slider turned to yellow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that saturation up to about 30%. Because I really want it to pop. Now, you can see that the whole scene here, any yellow instances have come out, and we don't want that. So one of the things actually I'm going to do here to counteract how bright that yellow is drop that color temperature. Also, to localize that yellow to the sign here, I'm going to take the masking brush, bring up the inspector, and then hit invert, which will effectively hide that color enhancer layer and then put me in a paint in mode. And that what allows me to do here is paint in that yellow effect. So I'm just going to do this quick masking job right here. What I'm going to also do is bring up the overlay mask so I can see where I'm masking in case I miss any areas. So I'm just going to go here, and I don't really mind if I get into the sky a bit because there's not that much yellow in a blue sky. So I'm going to get to this part of the sign right here and get that right there. And we're looking pretty good. I'm going to turn the mask off and then close the inspector. And here's what we've got so far. Next, I'm going to hit add, and I'm going to bring an overall texture boost to the foreground. To do that, I'm going to go to the color and tone category and then use my trusty tonal contrast. Now, when tonal contrast comes in, it applies everywhere, which I don't want. First thing I'm going to do is bring up that local contrast a bit, and then I'm going to bring out the shadow detail just a bit. Now, with that done, I'm going to drop the strength to 0 and then bring it up about halfway. That'll give me the desired effect. Now what I'm going to do is I only want that tonal contrast to apply to the foreground and the rock over here. So I'm going to take my masking bug, I'm going to click in the image, and then I'm going to put the bug over the area that I want the effect to apply. Now normally the bug is going to remove the effect. You see how the effect is everywhere but the bug. So just like before, I'm going to go to the inspector and hit the invert key, and that flips that really quickly. What that also allows me to do is take my masking brush now in tandem with the bug and just paint in where I want the effect applied. So you can see I'm just kind of getting right here, making sure that I get that. I'll bring the mask up and then just bring some of that detail in the rock. I'm not going to bring it in onto the sign. I don't want the sign to have much texture, and I do want a little bit of that background mountain to have a little bit of that tonal contrast. It makes it pop. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit add, and to bring your eye more towards the center of the frame, I'm going to use a vignette. And under the vignette category, there's a subtle vignette effect, which does a really nice job of just adding this very soft burnt edge. And so here, if we hide the effect bar, you can see I'm going to toggle the before and the after. Let me close the little dialog box. Command P on a Mac, Control P on a PC. Nice even exposure, really awesome stylized image. So I'm going to hit apply and then save, and then we're going to go back to Lightroom to finish things off. So now we're back in Lightroom, and I've got my image over here. I'm going to bring out the exposure just a tiny bit, but I'm also going to bring down the shadows. I want to have some of that shadow detail there, and I'm also going to bring down the black level just a bit. So we get this nice kind of rich scene. I'm going to bring some of that clarity up overall on the scene, and a little bit of contrast, and a tiny bit of a vibrance boost just to really pop every color. I can see I've got this one dust spot over here that I want to get rid of, so I'm just going to select the spot healing tool, click on that spot, and we're good to go there. And so here we go. This is the image, and really it's important to me. This sign now ultimately makes the shot. I even love now how we brought some of the ghosting of the one that used to be there. It just kind of adds character to the scene, and that yellow over here really does a nice job of balancing the overall image. So next time you're out and you're in an area where you just kind of have some scenario or situation that's outside of your control, don't just assume that, all right, I don't need to take the shot. See if there's a way that you can incorporate it into your image and actually make it a starring role. Be sure to download the preset that I used to get this look. It's going to work really nicely on any type of scene like this kind of arid, dry scene. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks a lot.